Hey Bulldogs, this is just a quick recording of the Lunch and Learn that we had presented today on frequent purposeful small group talk, which is one of the fundamental five. So let's talk about what these words actually mean. Frequent means often. So we'll talk about what that looks in this definition, but if you think about if you do something frequent, like do you eat frequently? Do you exercise frequently? What would that mean to you? Purposeful. Purposeful is something that's planned. Again, looking at your health. What do you plan to do purposefully? Do you purposefully drink your water? Do you purposefully add in fruits and vegetables? Do you purposefully spend time on the weekends watching Netflix? So, what do you do intentionally? Small group. Small group, if you ask teachers, usually we'll say between 2 and 5. So it's not a lot of people, enough where you can still have a conversation. And then talk. So what I'm doing right now, using my mouth. And then if someone here was with me, it would be to also be using my ears to be a good listener. So how does this affect us in our classroom, and why does it even matter? Well, research shows that we as humans need to hear something at least 3 times in order to remember it. So if you think about those tips and tricks that are really good to help kids learn, such as discussion, brainstorming, storytelling, writing, movement, simile, metaphor, analogy, reciprocal teaching, where we teach each other, those are all brain research ways to improve student outcomes. And we can integrate all of those into purposeful small group talk. So the whole point in having it happen frequently is that the brain needs starts and stops. We typically remember the first thing that we heard and the last thing that we heard. So if we give our students the opportunity to talk and have more stops in our lesson and the opportunity to talk about what they learned, they're going to remember more. So what do these words mean in the terms of the fundamental five? Well, frequent means about every 10 minutes of time that you as the teacher are talking. So you as the educator don't want to be talking in front of your class longer than 10 to 15 minutes. And based on things that I've read and the traumatized brain, I would suggest that it actually be closer to that 10, because the traumatized brain, and we think about what's gone on the last few years with the pandemic, and I have a 19-year-old daughter that I can testify to some, challenges that she's had. It actually can pay attention for less amount of time. So when it's purposeful, you want to be sure that your questions are pre-planned. So if we want the rigor of the questions that we need to think about those ahead of time. And small group is typically 2 to 4 students, definitely 5 at the maximum. So as you're thinking about your frequent small group purposeful talk, you want to be deliberate in how you put that into your lesson. You want to be sure that you plan it. You want to execute it, and then reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, what help do your students need in actually having conversations with their peers that are academically focused and not socially focused. So what can you do to help your students do better? A couple of strategies that you can add are the Kagan strategies, and these are the top 5. If you would like any help on implementing these, I am here for you. But these are great ways to be sure that that talk is purposeful, because it gives everyone a job. Now, I will also add the link to this presentation itself, not just the video, in our on our page in the RCHS site, because there's a link to Think It Up, which is from Lead Forward, and it has a lot of question stems that you could use to be sure that you are using more rigorous questions in your questioning. So some tips for me or from me are, if you use Google Slides to paste your lessons, and go ahead and plug in your questions. So if it's going to take me, if I'm going to get through these couple of, 5 slides, that's going to be about 10, 15 minutes. Then boom, my next slide is going to be the question that I've pre-planned ahead of time and I'm going to ask. When you're asking your kids to talk, I would also embed timers in your slides because those help your students know about how much time they have. And just a little tip from me is if you think you want to give them 3 minutes to talk, you could tell them that they have two. Always try to give them a little less time because it has a sense of urgency. Classroom Screen is another great tool with timers and other gadgets that you can use. If you haven't checked it out, I would definitely recommend that. And I want you to remember that this frequent purposeful small group talk is really for when we're having a lecture type setting. If your students are working independently, you do still want to break up the time that they work because their attention span will sway, but it doesn't really have to be 10 to 15 minutes. You could have them work for like 20 minutes, have a stop, have them talk to someone else in a different group or a different table, find out how far they've gotten in whatever assignment they've done, ask if they have any need any help. At the end, you can ask how far they got in their project and then ask what they needed to start on. So again, it's just refocusing them so that their attention doesn't wane. I know that you guys have your own tips for getting teachers, or not for getting teachers, I'm looking at trenches here, for getting your students to communicate in the classroom. So be sure to share those out in the PLC.